Every time you've got a problem, you buy another tool. It's almost always the tool is poorly deployed, underutilized, and then you move on. It's not so much about convincing them. It's about showcasing your ability to execute. And that's really where Chief Information Security Officers should concentrate. Where you see, this is not just about calling in the experts once a year or twice a year. You need to embed cybersecurity and business protection at large into the board's agenda.
Welcome to The Growth Switch, the podcast where we dive into the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. Now, for those of you just tuning in, Aries Media helps grow successful brands with comprehensive hands-on support for sales, business development, and performance marketing. Go ahead and drop growth into the comments if you want to learn how to do that. Now, today, are fortunate enough, we have a really special guest. Jean-Christophe Gaillard is the founder and CEO of Corix Partners. As a globally recognized cybersecurity strategist, he helps C-level executives navigate the complex intersection of governance, culture, and cyber resilience, which is a mouthful, but he's going to explain that to you. JC, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. Delighted to be with you. A bit of a different topic, I guess, this week for your guest, but I trust we're going to make it interesting.
It's true, and I mean, we focus on growth, and if you don't have protection and you're only focused on growing something without protection, you're really only growing your problems, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's important to see it in that context. And that's what I've been doing myself for the best part of the last 15 years since I started consulting. My background is not in consulting. I haven't spent my life going from KPMG to Deloitte to Accenture or, you name the next one. That's not my background at all. I'm French and British. I've been living and working in London and increasingly across London and France for the best part of the last 35 years. The first part of my career is in tech and in finance. I started at Paribas in a variety of tech jobs until it became BNP Paribas. Then I took over the job at Rabobank to run the security team for the international division, a team which I effectively set up. And that's the first part of my career, roughly 10 years in each. And I left Rabobank around 2009 to set up what eventually became Corix Partners. But I set it up very much to help top execs deal with the problems I was having. It was very much set up in that spirit. And yes, we've been working with mostly large organizations across UK and France, and sometimes in the US, sometimes elsewhere in Europe. We've been helping them with cybersecurity strategy, organization, and governance challenges. So I'm not really a technologist. I'm a technologist by background. But what I've been doing for the best part of the last 20 odd years is dealing with management problems and leadership problems. That's effectively what I've been doing. So that's why I'm thinking it fits well in your context, really, what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best reason to start any company is because you are legitimately experiencing a problem and you come up with a clever way or you come up with an interesting procedure in order to solve that problem. And it sounds like you kind of solved that problem for yourself first before you launched your own company.
Well, if you want, what has been fascinating me in the cybersecurity industry is the fact that, we tend to treat this as a new problem. We tend to treat this as something cutting edge, if you want. We tend to see cybersecurity as something new for many firms or for many people. We seem to be discovering it, but it's not. It's nothing new. Cybersecurity good practice has been structuring itself for the best part of the last 30 years. We used to call it information security. It was broadly the same thing. And those good practices still protect you today and still ensure a decent degree of compliance with most regulations. And they've been evolving for the best part of the last 30 years. The first standards started to be drafted around the mid-90s. That led to an ISO series, and then other types of frameworks have been developed on top of that. They're all built around the same principle, which is essentially defense in depth. In other words, you need to act at a variety of levels to protect your assets so that if one level is weak, then the next one will catch up. Those principles, if you want, have been at the heart of cybersecurity good practice from the start. And again, they started structuring themselves, those standards, 30 odd years ago. So if you want, what has been fascinating me is that I used to go to conferences 20, 25 years ago. I used to see those firms talking about what they were doing, and they were sending people, and everybody they were telling the world how great they were, and what needed to be done, and so on. And then one day, as a consultant, you get called in, typically by an incoming exec, a new CEO, a new CIO. You get called into one of those firms, and you look around and you realize that, wow, they're nowhere near where they should be. And that's the real issue. Cybersecurity maturity has not been growing in many large organizations as it should have been, which is why we're still seeing those waves of cyber attacks affecting household names in many, many countries. And that it's been at the heart of my reflection, if you want, over the past 10 to 15 years. Why are we seeing this? If we keep accepting that it's normal, that the threats keep evolving faster than companies can deploy defenses, if we can accept it as a fact of life, nothing will never move. But the reality is that 20 to 25 years is a very, very, very long time for those firms not to have made enough progress in that space. So if you want, I've been asking myself why. I've been asking myself, where are the roadblocks that have been preventing those firms from making progress? Many large organizations have had some form of information security practice all the time. They've had some form of information security budget all the time. They've been working with vendors all the time and suppliers, you name it, they've done it. Why is it that we're still seeing massive maturity problems around cybersecurity in many large firms? If we never ask ourselves the question why and where the roadblocks are, we will never move forward. So that's the heart of my reflection.
Yeah, absolutely. And not even just your reflection, you're also an expert in the space. You've written actually 2 different books on cybersecurity. In the Cybersecurity Spiral of Failure, great title, by the way. Walk us through what it looks like inside an organization that causes that type of failure to persist. You've stated that these people have these problems. You know that they have the problems, but how can 20 years go by and they still haven't solved it?
Exactly, 2 years or more for some in some regulated industries. So you really have to ask yourself those questions. If you look back historically, what you see at the heart of that spiral of failure is a mindset that was dominant during the first decade of the century amongst top execs, which is essentially to consider cyber threats as low probability, low impact type of events, something that forms part of the grand tapestry of things that go wrong, okay, or that can go wrong. And if it happens, you deal with it, you move on, you pay the fine, and that's it. And so that tendency, that mindset, was very much dominant during the first decade of the century. And it's at the heart of the problem. It's rooted in corporate endemic short-termism, and it's also rooted in cognitive biases. The fact this low probability, low impact approach to cybersecurity was never grounded in anything factual. It was just a perception. And it led to conception of risk appetites that were completely misleading and completely false, as a matter of fact, as it turned out to be. And if you want, during the first decade of the century, all information security professionals were struggling with the same sort of constant arbitration, if you want, between a risk appetite concept poorly framed and substantiated, and then compliance requirements and costs, fundamentally. And it was that equation that ruled the approach to cybersecurity during the first decade of the century. It led to minimalist approaches. It led to box ticking approaches to compliance requirements. And fundamentally, it's the heart of why many firms are still seeing low maturity levels. They didn't do enough when they needed to 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's the heart of the problem. That's the starting point. And when we turn into the second decade of the century, we see a number of things happening. We see the cloud emerging. We see the digital transformation accelerating. At the back of that, we see more and more cyber attacks, of course, leveraging the fact that not enough progress had been made during the first decade of the century. That's the historical background, if you want, in which the problem is rooted. And during that second decade of the century, what happens is that most large organizations start switching into a purely reactive mode. Okay, constantly firefighting, constantly dealing with the problem ahead, and effectively piling up a monumental amount of technical debt in the process. Every time there is a problem, you buy a new tool to fix that particular problem. Or every time you've got a regulatory inspection, or every time you've got an audit point to resolve. Same sort of thing. And you pile up a monumental quantity of technical debt because you constantly approach the problem from a technology angle, never looking at the real dimension of what cybersecurity is. It's not just a technology problem. It's by essence a cross silo type of problem. You cannot really solve cybersecurity issues just from within the tech itself. So if you think about, I don't know, username and passwords or identity management, as we call it in the trade. We've been distributing usernames and passwords for as long as we've had computers. But fundamentally, it's not down to the computer guy to decide whether this particular employee is allowed to have access to this particular system or that particular function in that particular system. That cannot be left to IT people. It has to come from the business. It has to come from HR in some instances. And you have to get those guys to work together. And that's what I meant by cross-silo. Cybersecurity, to truly address it, to truly embed it in the way the firm operates, you need to work in that way. And that's terrible because large firms don't work like that. It's plain and simple. They work in silo. They are just like that. And it's pointless to pretend anything else. And also they are very political. They are very territorial. They are, sometimes driven by personalities, sometimes impacted by conflicts of personalities as well. And, that's just the way large firms are. Again, it's pointless to pretend those things don't happen. So when you come across a problem which is complex in itself, where you are dealing with deep-rooted maturity issues and you go against the grain, then it becomes very hard effectively to transform. So that is the spiral of failure, if you want, because by the time you've started accumulating that technical debt I was talking about, you've got a monumental problem around security operations, because fundamentally those things are never thought through, if you want. They're never designed to work together. So you have very complex security operational processes. They're all glued up by manual fixes. It becomes very expensive to operate because you need more and more staff every time you want to scale, and you cannot find the staff because by now, every industry has woken up to the fact that cybersecurity is a global problem. So everybody is tapping into the same resource pool. So it's more and more difficult to get people, let alone good people. Okay. So, and you enter into that cycle where fundamentally cybersecurity becomes a cost, it becomes a problem, distrust sets in between security execs and top execs, and everything gets stuck together and you can't move anymore. That's the spiral. That's the story. If you want to know more, you got to buy the book.
Good. And go ahead and look down below for that link. We're going to have the link to that book down below. You just talk about technical debt. And I think that most lay people, let's just say your average person who is currently in this spiral of failure, they might not really know what technical debt is. They might kind of generally comprehend some of it. They'll understand certain types of debt, or maybe needing to take a payroll loan if they're having some cash sequencing issues. But just really quickly, for people who are not cybersecurity experts, why don't you just walk us through technical debt in a brief explanation so that people could understand why that's a problem?
By technical debt, I just mean, what I described before. Every time you've got a problem, you buy another tool. You deploy it partly, you underutilize it, because you've just bought it to fix a particular problem, to deal with a question from regulators, to close down an audit point, or just because you have seen a competitor struggling with a particular type of incident. So you buy the tool that's going to help you fix that. As I said, it's almost always the tool is poorly deployed, underutilized, and then you move on. And then the next time you have a similar problem, you do the same thing. And you carry on like that. And, playing that game across a period of 10 or 15 years, you have 20, 25 tools you need to operate all the time to effectively make sure your environment is secure. But it's all been done organically. Nothing never really works together. So when you need to investigate an incident, you have to go to one tool for some data, to another tool for more data, etc. And frankly, many analysts know the way it ends up. You end up cutting and pasting everything into Excel because otherwise you cannot see what's going on. And that's the sort of problems many security operations team have today. I mean, this is not something I'm making up. This is what I'm seeing in the field, and I've seen in the field for the best part of the last 20 years. And it's a problem at a number of levels. Those processes become inherently manual. They're expensive to run. They're error prone. They're difficult to scale in the context where there is a problem of skills on on the market. And on top of that, they're also attritive in themselves, because you look at the jobs the analysts have, you sell them Star Wars at the interview, then you end up giving them Excel you have to cut and paste data into. I mean, this is just silly. That's not what they want. So after a while, they find a better job, they go away, they never come back, and they carry with them an image of the cybersecurity industry, which is not what it should be. And it becomes frustration as well for security execs, for cybersecurity execs, because they can't scale, they can't move, they feel frustrated. As I said before, distrust starts to set in with top execs, and that leads to more frustration, and they leave after 2 or 3 years, effectively having achieved very little. So the short tenure of chief information security officers is a massive problem in the industry as well. 2 to 3 years in a job, you don't achieve much, frankly, in a large organization. And in the UK, we've been seeing a massive cyber attack over the past few weeks, really, with affecting the retailer Marks and Spencers. But you look at their background, you look at, I'm not going to speculate on what is happening or what isn't, and they're in the middle of dealing with it, and it's pointless to try to argue too much. The dust will settle, and we'll see what has or hasn't happened. But what I can see just looking into their background is that they've had at least 4 chief information security officers in 10 years. And that's at the heart of the problem in many firms. In a couple of years, you don't achieve anything in a large organization. I stayed about 9 years at Rabobank, between 9 and 10 years at Rabobank. I know what it is. It's hard. It's hard. You work in cycles. There are peaks and troughs, and there are good days and there are bad days. But change happens over time. If I had left Rabobank after 2 or 3 years, I would not have achieved much. I can tell you that. But you need to understand that. That's also something that has to be understood at the top of the firm, because you have to incentivize those people to stay the course. Changing jobs every 2 or 3 years, is not transformative. It's pointless to pretend anything else. It is not transformative. The next guy comes in, invariably coming from the same community. They come in with their own ideas. They come in with their own pet vendors or their pet subjects or their pet consultants, and everything starts again. It's not transformative. And that's at the heart of that spiral of failure. It's another dimension of that spiral of failure. I'm not sure I've answered your question now. I've gone off a tangent a bit.
No, it's great. I think it very well explained it. So say we did want to create this transformative change. Say you were able to go speak with the gatekeepers and have them change this at an organic level, erase the technical debt by going back and solving all of the problems in a way that works together. How would you do that?
To break the deadlock, you've got to work at 2 levels, in my opinion. Broadly speaking, in the industry, the dominant line of thought is, you have to convince the guys at the top. Okay. I think those ships have sailed. They've sailed long ago. I think the guys at the top don't need convincing. They know perfectly well that cyber attacks happen all the time. They don't need convincing. They know they happen. They know the threats are real. They know they can cripple the business. They know it. It's pointless to infantilize them and to pretend they don't. And it's pointless to pretend they need convincing. As I said, I really think those ships have sailed. I'm hearing more and more from CIOs and board members questions like, are we spending enough on cyber? That is a far more common question nowadays than, why do you want to spend this? That's a far, far more common question. So it's not so much about convincing them. It's about showcasing your ability to execute. And that's really where chief information security officers should concentrate. Showcasing on the fact that they can deliver. It's a massive problem for many of them, because having struggled for pretty much all their career to get funding, all of a sudden when the conversation shifts from why do you want to spend this to how much you want, when money appears, now you're on the spot, because now you need to deliver. And that's a massive challenge for many CISOs, because they have not built over the past 10 years the type of skills, the type of leadership skills they need now to deliver, because they've been stuck in firefighting mode, been stuck dealing with technical problems all the time. They haven't built the sort of management gravitas, the sort of political finesse you need to deliver on large projects in large firms. So many of them struggle, but that's still the main challenge. That's how they need to approach it. They need to rebuild trust with the top execs, and you rebuild trust by showcasing your ability to execute and your ability to protect the firm and to get things done. That's my first answer the first part of my answer to your question. And it does start indeed by decluttering that cybersecurity estate that's been building up over the years and cutting through that technical debt, simplifying. Of course, AI has a role to play in this. Absolutely. AI has a big role to play and is starting to play a big role in allowing security operations to become more efficient, more automated and more efficient. So that, if you want, is the dynamic that you need to push from the bottom up if you want. It's pointless to carry on trying to tell top execs, trying to convince them. For the past 20 years, all sorts of theories have been floating around in terms of cyber risk quantification and return on security investment and all those things. Those are all finger in the air type of assessments in the end. I've never come across one that frankly made me feel totally comfortable. And it's a numbers game that you can't win fundamentally. Okay, it's a numbers game that you can't win because you think you're dealing with something rational, but you're not. The problems at the top are rooted in, if they're rooted in something, they're rooted in cognitive biases. They're not rooted in something you can fight through numbers and logic and reasoning. So I really think those approaches have failed over the last 20 years because they've been tried to be too rational, if you want. You don't break cognitive biases in that way. But in all cases, I think the bottom-up game has to be focused on rebuilding trust. And in my opinion, you rebuild trust through clarity of vision, operational excellence, execution excellence. And that builds trust. When trust is there, there is no problem with budgets, if you want. Many of the budgetary discussion around cybersecurity are rooted in distrust. The top execs they've seen chief information security officers coming in with grandiose plans, asking for millions, and then disappearing after 2 or 3 years, leaving everything half done. They've seen it time and time again. They don't want to see that again. They want the firm protected. So anyway, that's the way the bottom-up game has to be rebuilt, if you want. But you also need a top-down push, I think. And it's time for the board, top execs, to really own cybersecurity as a business problem, not as a technology problem, but as a business problem. So it's also time to rebuild the way cybersecurity is positioned at the top and to start embedding it in corporate governance for good. And it's not just about having the right skills at board level. The right skills can be brought in. You can have independent directors. You can bring consultants. You can bring those skills into the board when necessary. It's accountability that needs to be restored. Somehow you need to have one exec across the table accountable for protecting the firm, not just from cyber threats, from any threats. God knows that the world is a complicated place these days. So this is it. And it's that level of accountability that needs to be restored. So you need to build, if you want some sort of chief security officer role at the top of the firm, you have to make it big enough to attract the right caliber of individual into it. So it's not just about cyber, it's probably about cyber and resilience and business continuity and privacy and compliance. You need to figure out the right portfolio you can bring together so that you can attract the right caliber of person into it. And of course, offering them the position as a step in their career, as part of a broader career plan. Large organizations are good. Some of them are doing those things. So I think it's part of the dynamics that have to be put in place to start breaking that spiral of failure as well.
So these companies know that they need to do something and they need to take action. What's something that you face at Corix Partners? What's something that you face when you want to come to these people and help them make this change? You want to help them implement positive change, break down the silos, make sure that things are implemented well. What's the pushback that you receive from these companies? What's preventing you from essentially growing your own company and getting more sales from them?
Many companies are still struggling with too many different problems, I would say, at the same time. The last few years have been complicated for many firms. The last few years have been complicated. They need to put things in perspective a little bit. You had the COVID pandemic. You had the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. You had all types of geopolitical tensions affecting the world, really, down to more recent situations around tariffs and all that. It's complicated. The environment, the operating environment is complicated. So I think that's what has made it difficult over the the past few years. It's about putting things in perspective. It's about understanding really where the priorities need to be. And I think that's what we're seeing with many organizations.
Yeah. Yeah. So what could reduce the friction? What could
In other
make your
words,
job
if you want,
easier?
yes, they need to do something on cyber, but they need to do many other things as well. That's the situation. They appreciate cyber is key,
Mhm.
but it's also about everything else.
Yeah.
Not to mention that many firms have struggled throughout the COVID pandemic. I mean, it's been some industry sectors have thrived and some not so much.
Yeah.
So it's been a number of complicated years.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if you could remove the friction, if you could make it easier for them, I mean, is there anything off the top of your head that you could think of that would make it easier for company buy-in to have this process happen?
I really think it's the top-down approach, though. So really positioning cybersecurity at board level, or at least as part of the leadership team, clarifying accountabilities, those things can be done. Those things are not difficult to do. Bringing in expertise at board level is not something difficult to do, but you need to do it in a structured way. You see, this is not just about calling in the experts once a year or twice a year. You need to embed cybersecurity and business protection at large into the board's agenda. I think that's the idea. And that's something that can be done. I think there is appetite, and that's something that can be done, but in a structured manner, not just as a one-off every year or whenever the regulators have told you to do it or something like that. It's about doing it in a structured way. And then there is appetite in many organizations. The question keeps coming up, and I think this is something that can be done. And at the back of that, build up a different discussion, a different dialogue across the firm, and start pushing down a different type of agenda, building up that chief security officer role I was talking about, and then culturally pushing it down. But it's about culture ultimately. It's the cultural weight that will carry it down, if you want, and that's got to start at the top. If there is a clear sense of ownership at the top, if people across the firm can see that the guys at the top are serious about it, that they're talking about it, that they take it seriously, gradually it should filter down. Ultimately, you protect what you care about. That's the kind of mindset you need to build. You protect naturally what you care about. In an organization that doesn't work, in an organization where the culture is toxic, in an organization where you're asking employees to do something, but the guys at the top are doing something else in terms of cybersecurity, you will never build anything lasting, or you will never engineer any kind of attachment to the firm and its data and its information assets. And if you don't care about the firm, the brand, the people, because the culture is toxic, then forget about protecting the information assets or the data. You're not going to do it. And it's not about deploying some form of security training program or this or that. You're just wasting your money. It's the cultural fix that is required. So I think working at the top, if top execs really believe in it, they have to show it. They have to embody that protective culture, that culture of business protection. And in my opinion, gradually it filters.
And in fact, this is probably a good time for let the listeners and the watchers of the episode know that you've actually written another book as well, the Cybersecurity Leadership Handbook for the CISO and the CEO. Yeah. So, I think that probably imparts some of the lessons that you're talking about in more detail. Yeah.
The two books work together. The Cybersecurity Spiral of Failure is a little bit a management summary of the other one. It's the same content. I mean, ultimately, they've been designed in that way. So the Spiral of Failure is a quick read. The handbook is more a reference book, if you want. The handbook is a collection of articles I've written over the past 10 years. They're grouped by theme, and they revisit many of the topics we've been talking about here, the skills gap, all those aspects. But it's essentially a collection of articles. So it's 100 plus bite-sized pieces, and it's reasonably easy to read. They're classified by theme, and that's why I call it a handbook. It's meant to be used. It's meant to be used to when you're looking for something specific about a specific topic. And the Spiral of Failure is more a management summary, and it articulates the dynamics we've been talking about. Why is it that large firms are stuck in so many maturity problems? Why is it that cybersecurity maturity has stagnated for so long? And then what to do to break out of it. So they work together, if you want, in that way.
Yeah. So, for people out there who already do have buy-in, who realize that there's a problem and want to do something about the problem, if you could tell them one small thing that they could do right now today to just start that push forward in the right direction, what's one thing that they could start actually doing today rather than intellectualizing?
When I talk to chief information security officers and that question comes up, I tell them the same thing. Keep your head down, get things done. Get things done. Stop complaining all the time that you don't have enough resources or this or that. Get things done. Get stuck in, get things done. Show your worth. Show your bosses that you can get things done. Rebuild trust by showcasing execution excellence. That's what I was saying before. Get things done. Stop complaining, get things done. And the rest will follow.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a bit hard as a message. I agree. It's a bit harsh, but sometimes a number of things need to be said. That's also the tone of the books and the tone of the articles I've been writing. Yeah. This is about time that a number of things are said. So it's time to get out of that cybersecurity echo chamber, if you want, or cybersecurity as an enabler, or the skill gap, or this or that. Yes, and so what? How do we try to find ways of getting out of those dynamics? Why are we stuck in those type of situations?
No, that's smart stuff, and I think that people do need to consider that. Absolutely. Jean-Christophe, it's been wonderful having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for your time and expertise. Again, those books and the links are going to be down below. If you want to find out more about Corix partners and working with JC, go ahead and check out those links down below. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you for inviting me, and all my details are on corixpartners.com as well. Thank you.